The average rent for a one-bedroom Toronto condo in 2010 it was $950 a month. Wow. And if we look at where that number is today, that is $2,320 a month.
You're watching the Hersh Condos digital experience. And here's your host, Mitch Parker.
Welcome to episode 11 of the Hersh Condos digital experience. I am your host, Mitch Parker, and you all know the gentleman sitting next to me, Jody. Thank you for being here.
Thanks again, Mitch. It's always a pleasure.
So we are going to throw it back all the way until 2010.
Right, we're going to do a little decade in review.
Decade in review.
Right, that only happens once every 10 years. There's lots of years in review, but good old decade in review, you can't beat that. I mean, century in review is pretty cool.
Yeah, so that'd be really cool. I don't think we'll be around by then.
No. Join us.
Join us.
Join us in 80 years for century in review. But for right now, we're going to do decade in review. And this is a lot of fun, this episode. There's a lot about real estate in the last decade, but also just our general pop culture. We wanted to have a little bit of fun with that and see some of the things that weren't around maybe 10 years ago. And we're going to dive into that, Mitch. I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. So let's start by painting a picture. So the year is 2010.
Yep.
And, we've come to like just be so integrated with technology and sort of the way things work. But if we were standing here and it was December 2010 or December 2009, which I guess is technically the 10-year mark, right? So there was no Instagram. Think of what you had to do. Like you actually probably like your phone sat off to the side most of the time.
Well, if you keep in mind though, the original iPhone, which was technically a phone with a cool touch screen.
Right.
That only came out in 2008, so would have been maybe an iPhone 1.
And that was like a brick.
It was crazy, yeah.
And so if you wanted to meet a girl or a guy, you actually had to go to like a Chapters or like some kind of restaurant and do it. There was no online dating. And if you wanted a car to come and pick you up, there was this thing called a taxi, which would come and do it. There was no such thing. Uber wasn't even like a word that people knew on a daily basis.
Interesting. Yeah. If anything, these things were just like getting started right around that time. And to see how 10 years later, they literally monopolize or help us operate our daily lives, we think back, how could we have, survived without those things? So really neat stats there.
Yeah. And so, just to expand on that point, we're familiar with the real estate industry. And even if we look at things like Instagram and we look at things like Uber, Instagram has become such a massive part of business generation and how we get out there and how we build our brand, right?
It's the reason I have a job here.
That's right, exactly. And so, and even Uber, if you live downtown and you show condos primarily, like you don't even necessarily need a car now. You just grab an Uber and go around on your tour of showings, and you don't have to worry about finding parking. You get dropped off at the door. And I know a number of agents who utilize that quite efficiently, actually.
Well, it's interesting. Like once Uber became so popular, everybody always starts to think, well, what is it gonna be 5 or 10 years down the road? And I always thought, wow, this is becoming such a popular thing. I wonder if in 10 years from now, people won't own cars. Maybe it will be some type of like subscription-based model where everybody, anytime you want to get from place to place, it actually makes more economical sense and who knows, maybe there won't even be a driver. The car will just show up.
That'll be cool.
You get in it. There's no more texting and driving, distracted driving. It'll probably make the roads a lot more safe. But it is, it's fun to look into the future and say, hey, well, these things that are just starting now, maybe in our decade in review in 10 years from now, will be like, there used to be people who drove Ubers.
Right, exactly.
Right.
In 2020,
right.
People drove Ubers.
Yeah,
that was like a thing.
So here's my prediction. In 2030, they won't be.
All right, so let's jump in to the real estate numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw this out there as a question. What do you think the average rent for a one-bedroom Toronto condo was in 2010?
I did grow up in Toronto, so I could take a wild
it.
guess. Like a one-bedroom condo in downtown Toronto. I don't know, like $1,400 maybe.
The price in 2010 was $950.
Wow. Wow.
And so in 2010 it was $950 a month.
Wow.
And if we look at where that number is today, that is $2,320 a month.
Wow. That's like, 1,400 and change more over the 10 years.
It's absolutely incredible how much the city has grown.
That's
and
a good one.
expanded and
I like
become
that
more
one.
Expensive. Okay. And now let's talk about sale numbers. So the average 1-bedroom condo in 2010.
Okay. Average 1-bedroom condo.
This is a fun game, by the way. I think we should start a new experience.
Especially with somebody who really didn't study the market back then. I
Yeah.
kind of just lived
You lived
in
here.
the city, so I could guess. The average 1-bedroom, Toronto, $468,000.
Not super far off, actually. It's $314,000.
That's kind of far off, Mitch.
I'm trying to make you feel better.
Thank you.
So $314,000 in 2010, and in 2019, $628,000.
Wild.
So
Wow.
more than double the price in the last decade. And if you actually look at a chart of that growth, a majority of it would have been in the most current 5 years, as opposed to the previous 5 years. So, condos didn't grow for a while, and then they really took off.
Wow.
Especially as houses became more expensive, and more people were forced to look at condos. And then there sort of became this transition, I think, over the last decade into the condo lifestyle, where a lot of people, it was like a preference more than a forced thing.
Yeah.
And so that drove the demand for condos up. And if we talk about how many units were built, I think the number was something like 80,000 condos have been built in Toronto over the last decade.
Like units.
Units.
Okay.
Yeah, not condo buildings.
Okay.
The other thing that we really need to focus on, and we really need to bring attention to, is the actual stability that we've experienced over the last decade. Canada has, this was more than a decade ago, but the financial crisis that we weathered extremely well compared to our counterparts in the US. But people look to Canada as one of the safest places to place your capital now. And I think that although it's not that catchy of a tagline, the stability is something that's enabled us to grow so much. So if you look at something like the Bank of Canada mortgage rate, so they have like a 5-year fixed mortgage rate, right? So in 2010, it was 5.57%, whereas in 2019, just about 10 years later, the number is actually 5.2%. So really only basically a 0.4% shift. Now, that number moved a little bit. It fluctuated over the 10 years, but you can see from where it was then to where it is now is really stable. And for a lot of you who are listening or watching, you might be like, what are you talking about? A 5-year fixed is like 2.99 or 3.14 or something. So what happens is the Bank of Canada releases their amount, and then banks actually then go and discount that rate. So it's a form of competition basically between them. So you'll see a posted rate by a bank much lower than that, but these are using the Bank of Canada numbers. The other thing to talk about stability is the prime rate. So in 2010 was 2.25. And in 2019 is 3.95.
Okay.
So, we've gone through basically a decade of what a lot of people would consider low interest rates. And it's sort of been designed to stabilize the economy, make sure that all of our economics were in check, that we weren't in any sort of housing bubble. I think just the price run up we've had, it's so easy to use the term bubble. But
right.
The population grew from 5.5 million in the Greater Toronto Area in 2010, and that's now up to 6.2 million. So, 700,000 over a decade. And it's important to note who's coming into the country as well, right? We're getting an educated immigrant. We're getting somebody who comes and contributes to the economy and the workforce. And these are the type of people that you really want to bring in.
For sure.
And looking at the trend up to, they did like an estimated up to 2035, so where we'll be potentially 15 years from now, that number goes from 6.2 to 7.1 million. So another 900,000 people net here in the GTA.
It'd be interesting, you know, looking at the official plan and things like that, to look at what's going to happen and how we plan on, you know, creating a sustainable society to uphold all of that.
Yeah, and infrastructure and all that stuff. And just a quick side note. So Jody and I were at a holiday party a couple days ago for a developer, which had a great time at. And we're standing there and we're talking with an architect, and and he's showing us a site that he's working on. It was really interesting. And Jody, out of nowhere, busts out the term. What did you bust out?
Well, the guy he was or the architect, funny enough, was stumbling on remembering the amount of time that and I guess zoning bylaws are looked at as a part of the official plan, and I just happen to know the statistic.
You happen to know that it was every 5 years they look
actually
at
it's every 5 years. Like, that's right, every 5 years.
And if there was a camera there and you panned to my face, it was like unbelievable shock in the best way possible.
You start to learn things around here, Mitch. You keep your ears open, but that's what they do, is they put out the projections for 10 to 15 years, and every 5 years they'll go and they'll review them. Is this area of the city properly zoned for the way that it's developing? You know, I'm imagining that City Place probably 20, 30 years ago maybe had some different zoning, maybe some more commercial space in there. And as the city begins to populate and the different types of people come in, and things just naturally change over time, as we're discussing today, those different amendments and provisions start to get put into place to help the society continue to strive.
So let's transition a little bit into, like, you know, from the past decade to maybe a little bit about where things are going to go, because I think what everybody can agree on is that, you know, Toronto's going to keep growing. It's going to keep expanding. You know, we're going to need more infrastructure. And so I'm going to make a prediction of, you know, things like Ontario Place, which is right downtown on the water. Right now, it's like a massive parking lot in a building that's not really used. If I was a betting person, I would say by when we sit here in 2030, that will be totally changed. Whether it's, you know, condos or commercial or a hotel or whatever it might be. I mean, I guess that's going to be one of the bigger undertakings of the decade.
We also want you guys to be as interactive as possible in these podcasts.
Yeah, totally.
We'd love to know your comments, thoughts. Call us, text us. I mean, email us. However you get in touch with us through whatever medium you're watching this on, there's most likely some type of comment. It'd be cool to hear what you think is going to happen with a piece of land like Ontario Place that truly does have so much potential for the next 10 years, especially as the city starts to blossom.
Jody, thank you for being here.
No problem.
This was a ton of fun.
That was a pleasure.
This has been episode 11 of the Hersh Condos Digital Experience. Have an amazing, amazing holiday season, because we are filming this right before the holidays.
That's true.
We will be back in 2020. So make sure you follow us, share this post, tell your friends, tell random strangers if you want to. And until then, have an amazing day.
Thanks for watching the Hersh Condos Digital Experience. Stay tuned for more exciting content. Subscribe to our channel and make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms.